All the rock and then some.
Get ready to rock radio.
Keep Feenstra rocking your world on Get Ready to Rock Radio.
This is the Pete Feenstra feature for Get Ready to Rock Radio. Welcome to the show. Tonight I'm speaking to Richard Rozze, an electric and acoustic guitar player, vocalist, composer and arranger. His musical influences span classic British rock, blues, jazz, fusion, Celtic and bluegrass music. He's recorded 2 acoustic albums with Open Water, while his new cross-genre Lion project is his second solo album. It finds him in a power trio format using subtlety and finesse instead of simply power, with bassist Jonathan Noyce of Jethro Tull and Gary Moore fame and drummer Simon Lee of the Temperance Movement and Katie Mellier fame. Okay, let's play the opening track of Richard Rozze's album. This is called Living Man.
Must have been a song about it. It must have been something I heard one night when I was alive. I found myself singing through it, climbing through the words with open eyes. Feel the melody rise. Take hold of my hand, we are free, free. A shelf with a book upon it falls to the ground and opens wide. I take a look inside. Message in it. I turn the pages to the right. No need to fight. Turn from the hard road, for it will bring you down. Feel the journey lift you high. Come with me. If you take hold of my hand, lost at sea, I am a living man. Come with me. If you take hold of my hand, we are free, free. come with me. If you take hold of my hand, we are free, free. Come with me. I am a living man, lost at sea. Lost at sea.
That was Richard Rozze and Living Man, the opening track of his brand new album called Lion on Waterbound Records. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Oh, hi Pete. Nice to be here, and thanks for having me as a guest.
Our pleasure. Great record. Hope to play some tracks from it and get people interested. Let me praise here a quote from you, which I think is very interesting, when you said, "I miss the lack of attention to the craft of songwriting and composition in the music scene. Often exceptional virtuosic musicians have nothing to say in their compositions." You also said, "I miss the excitement and suspense of having to wait for an album or to buy an album and to actually own the music." So you've covered both the musicians and the consumer there, Richard. So do you see the problem with contemporary music as being symbiotic then?
Yeah, I mean, I think the music that gets pushed into the mainstream, I mean, there's a lot of obviously great music that is yet to be discovered, and there's a lot of it online, but I think the music that's getting pushed into the mainstream, for me, it lacks the craft that a lot of what I call the great songwriters, the great artists, studied for years. For example, I was listening to an interview with Jimmy Webb, and he said that lately, over the last bunch of years, he's stopped writing for the pop scene, and he only writes now for musical theatre.
Wow,
so obviously the musical theatre world, his knowledge of harmony and melody is appreciated, and I feel he feels like he's unappreciated in the commercial pop scene, which is such a shame, because he was such a voice in the 70s and 80s, all those great tunes he wrote, and without him you wouldn't have had the likes of Glenn Campbell and those great artists as well, singing those amazing songs.
Well, I was speaking to the two guys from original Stackridge. This would be about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And they were, James Warren in particular wrote a huge hit, which was on several films. But they were bemoaning the fact back then that they were 59-year-old songwriters writing for a 19-year-old market.
Yeah.
It's the same. I guess it's the same thing. On Living Man, I love the kind of juxtaposition of the opening riff, the smouldering groove, as I call it, and your gentle vocals, which sometimes during the course of the album become something like Nick Drake, really. What was your intention, though, on that particular song, to let all those elements bubble to the surface and see where they took you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the whole album was conceived like that, but Living Man is a good example of that. I mean, it started off as a riff. I mean, I probably picked up my guitar and plugged it into an overdriven amp and came up with that riff. And then, like everything I try and do now is not to pigeonhole it into anything too obvious. So, and I'm always interested in the yin and the yang. So what can contrast to that without it sounding too schizophrenic, It's what can contrast. So often it's the light and the shade. So the riffs being the darker part of the song, and then brighter tones and different chords to complement with that. And it's interesting that you said about the Nick Drake thing, and that's a real compliment, because he was a massive influence on me, particularly when I was 16, 17. I mean, I got all of his albums and played a lot of the songs, all the standard tune-ins, and sung Northern Sky and Time Has Told Me, and I was aware that by making a what would be conceived as a rock album, I don't have a rock voice, and so we can talk about a bit later. But that was, for me, that was okay, because again, it's that juxtaposition of the light and the dark, which I'm into.
Well, my next question is when I reviewed this album, the riff in Living Man was it was really gnawing in my brain, and it was Sonny Landreth. And I couldn't remember who it was at the time when I wrote the review. I was talking about Eric Johnson and others, which it also reminded me of. But it was specifically Sonny Landreth, and thinking about that, and more generally, I mentioned Eric Johnson and people like Pat Metheny. Well, were you aware of those kind of players before you went to music college and studied presumably jazz and stuff?
Yeah, but Eric Johnson, definitely. I remember getting into him when I was 16 and learning a couple of his songs. I remember learning East West, and I played that for my A-level recital. I remember that. So I was really into him. And I used to go and watch Satriani and Vi and all those players. So those guys, the G3 concert I watched over and over again, with the three of them. And he stood out as the guy that had this quest for purity of tone and orchestration, which was a massive influence for me. The way he just stands up, just him, a bass and a guitar, and it sounds like you're listening to three guitars at once. And so he was a huge influence, and I kind of didn't come back to him till much later, because I heavily got into the jazz thing after I left school. And I went to university. But funnily enough, I was aware of Pat Metheny because I remember listening to Steve Reich's Electric Counterpoint, which is a minimalist piece of music, and just being amazed that this was a guitar that wasn't overdriven. At the time, I was listening to Gary Moore, Still Got the Blues, and I just assumed the electric guitar was pretty much always overdriven or Mark Knopfler kind of twangy sound. And I didn't know it was Pat Metheny till much later, and I'd probably heard of him on the David Bowie track This Is Not America as well, which was David Bowie plus the Pat Metheny band. So it was there. Maybe those influences led me to investigate jazz more, but Pat Metheny I didn't discover till I went to university, and in fact I did my dissertation on Pat Metheny and got into him in a big way and went and saw him live a bunch of times. Well,
there's certainly elements of him on here, that's come through. This is what I'd call a cross-genre album. It spans, to my ears, rock, blues, jazz, fusion, folk and Americana because of the songwriting. But I always come back to your kind of subtle guitar tones within what I call very organic arrangements. Are they an extension then of lyrical meaning and the general feel as you go into a song?
Yes, I mean, I suppose because it's lyrical, I don't have the technique of people like Satriani and Vi and Eric Johnson. My fingers just won't move that fast. So I've always been drawn to players that have space. Paul Kossoff, Peter Green.
In a completely different way. Yeah, Kossoff, very good point. Yeah,
absolutely. And that intensity of playing a note and making it resonate and making it mean something. And that's right. I mean, that is the purpose of the album. It's to have a meaning. It's to resonate with everyone, with all human beings, I hope. And those players I find do that. They play a note and they knock you out. Kossoff knocks you out when he plays a note. It's powerful.
So you've said that you had no preconceived idea of what the album should be. So as you went along, did you find yourself going into a load of different directions, having to pull back at some point to have a kind of linear thing going on?
Yeah, not really. The songwriting came first. So I also play in an acoustic band called Open Water with my partner, Joanne, and the other guitarist is Jeff Alexander, who was my first real guitar teacher when I was 11. He introduced me to all those great guitarists. So with that band, I heavily got into the songwriting part and really studied Jimmy Webb and the American songwriters as well as British folk music. So I knew that it would be a song-based album. And for me, that was a way of finding my own voice. I found it much harder to write an instrumental guitar album and try and to sound original. And in fact, Gary Moore said that as well. He said, I could never write an album like Satriani or Vai. You know, he comes from a song and blues based.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've always enjoyed singing, and I've always, you know, with Open Water, really got into lyric writing. So it wasn't, I didn't have any preconceived ideas on how it would be, but I knew songwriting would be at the basis. So I knew it wasn't going to be a jazz album or what could be conceived as a jazz album. So it wouldn't be instrumental, which was really exciting for me and a real challenge. And it comes back to those early influences of, you know, Mark Knopfler, Gilmour, you know, Clapton. The solo would enhance the song. So
yeah, it certainly does on this record. Yeah.
That's right, and that was what I found myself doing. You know, there's a couple of instrumentals on there, but I even conceived those as song structures rather than big epic prog compositions. You know, so there wasn't a preconceived idea over this would be a rock album, this would be a jazz track, this would be a blues track. It was just whatever suited the song that I was writing, and some of them started on acoustic guitar.
Well, thinking about your song craft, because that's what it is, you've said in a different context, but it's related to this, that the art that we make will resonate when the time is ready. So my question to you would be, what's the basis of your optimism, do you think? I mean, especially given the fact that the music scene's swamped by too much output and far too few listeners.
Yeah, well, I think if I'm not optimistic, I'll just go mad.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. But thinking about that though, still, do you think there's still a market for kind of a new generation of guitarists to supersede the likes of John Abercrombie that you mentioned in print, Ralph Towner, John Schofield, and Terz Rick Doll?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I think it was. I mean, coming back to that earlier question. You know, I was thinking about that this morning, and I think art or anything that does have a time where it comes to the fore. So for example, as you know, authors, artists, you know, maybe Nick Drake is a good example. They're not recognised at the time of their.
Oh, Nick Drake wasn't, that's for sure, yeah.
No, and then suddenly there's a kind of hunger for him, and I think there's something out there in the atmosphere that says, right, it's ready now. People need it now. You know, I mean it's very. I mean, Nick Drake must have found it very difficult to be writing that music, recording it, and then not being received.
He did have. What's the American guy that ran his label? He did have him.
Yes.
A big mentor, which kept him going, I suppose, you know.
Yeah.
And he was signed up, of course. That was the important thing.
Yeah, he just couldn't play live, could he? I mean,
no.
But, you know, and figures in history. You know, I've been studying and reading a lot about the Gnostics, which were a kind of Druid pagan kind of group, and they were basically wiped out. And then only now, over the last bunch of years, people have got really interested in the story of those people. So, you know, I hope that you know, the messages aren't lost forever, that there is a time when they can be read. Right. But that doesn't answer your second question about John Abercrombie and those guys.
Well, I mean, I suppose, I don't know the timeline and their respective ages, but, you know, you have got Eric Johnson and all sorts of other people now who are probably younger than those people I just mentioned, so... Yeah, I mean, Abercrombie and those guys that were big when I was studying at Guildhall, really, they really helped me unlock, you know, improvisation on a much deeper level, especially John Abercrombie, you know, and you know, to supersede those people, that's a tough question, because I wonder if when they were making their music, if they were aware that they would be changing.
the genre of the music that they were particularly writing in. John Abercrombie said he could only play the way he could play because he was known as Mr. Wrong Notes. So in America, he'd go and play bebop gigs in New York, wherever he was playing, and he just couldn't do it. He tried to play like Wes Montgomery, couldn't do it. So then ended up playing in this more modal way, more European way, even though he's American.
Very much so, European, yeah.
So I wonder if these people that become, the giants, I don't think they're aware at the time. I think they're just playing the way that they can only play,
Good point. Let's play another track now. This is called The River.
So great, he caught my wandering eye. He said to me, no one will win, it's happening again. I held my head, I heard them call the loaded guns and off to war to save mankind. Is not our fate, or is it all too late? If you go down to the river, when it flows so deep, so wide and true, through distant lands, from the mouth to its end, a river that flows through me and through you. Them and us and them, on and over again. Just say no, hold out a hand, stand on common land. With open doors and spirits high, on golden shores, in rainbow sky, the earth will breathe and man will heal, for souls they cannot steal. If you go down to the river, when it flows so deep, so wide and true, through distant lands, from the mouth to its end, a river that flows through me and through
was Richard Rozze and The River, taken from his brand new release called Lion, Waterbound Records. Now there's that Paul Cutoff influence you mentioned, a big riff there. I also noticed a kind of Neil Young style, what I call sludgy groove, lots of space, and a Jackson Browne style vocal on an uplifting chorus, and lovely soloing on there. And that track kind of balances all the kind of diffuse elements and draws a listener into a lovely chime-filled meandering musical journey. How did you conceive of that track then, to pull all those elements together?
Yeah, that started off as an acoustic track. So I had I definitely had the verse worked out, and then I think the riff came later, and it definitely came from listening to Free without a doubt. I mean, they are my all-time favourite rock band.
Really?
I love that band, the space in that band, and I think that's what it was, is trying to get that groove, that space between the bass drums and the guitar. I mean, that band grooved like no one else at that time, really. They had a very individual way of all three of them working together behind Paul Rodgers, was just so unique. So that was the quest, and there's some Paul Cutoff voicings in there as well that I stole from a track.
That's very honest of you.
Yeah, I mean that was, it's my nod. I think because he was such a big inspiration. All Right Now was the first solo, I think, or the second solo I'd ever learned in my life. So that was my nod to him. But again, it's that juxtaposition of the heavy riff, and then the chorus. It goes to kind of like more major chords, a brighter guitar tone. Because the message of that song is quite ominous in the verse. It could be perceived as two characters watching soldiers get ready to go to war. A lot of these songs have two or three different meanings. Yeah, but you could see it like that. And then the chorus is let's all go down to the river, and the river is the thing that joins us all together. The oneness, and the purpose of this album really is if we all just realise our full potential, you could change all the problems of the world overnight. Yeah, but you've got to get people to listen. That's and in that regard, you've said about this album, with this trio, I feel I've found my voice as a composer and electric guitarist. It's the result of all my influences, and I hope it brings a fresh approach to the guitar trio format. So at what point do you think you did find your voice? Was it literally on this album, or did you with your acoustic stuff before? The acoustic stuff definitely helped the songwriting, absolutely, and with the open water music, it's quite we all write in certain ways. So the tracks I write have definitely got a more of a jazzy influence, and then when I improvise, there's a crossover between jazz and bluegrass in the way I play acoustic guitar. But it was this album that, using the electric guitars, that actually helped me find my voice, because previously with jazz, you know, when I was studying jazz and playing jazz, I tend to just use a clean guitar sound. It's just a guitar straight into an amp. And it's a hollow body guitar made by John Case, who's a local guitar maker here near Ramsgate. But I've got loads of gear, you know, so I thought, well, I've got all this gear, so I've got Marshall amps, Fender amps, Strats, Telecasters, Les Pauls, you know, and I thought, well, there's a reason why I've got these, because if I was just a jazz purist, I'd sell them all and you know, just have one guitar. So the quest was to use all the gear, because that was very honest to me, and to come up with something that subconsciously and organically, all the influences would come through. And I found the rock thing obviously coming through using Marshall amps and Les Pauls. You know, it just naturally came through that way. You know.
Now I've got so much to squeeze in here. I was going to talk about the ECM label, but I'm not going to have time now. But I see a lot of parallels between the music on that label and also the fact that they use artwork as part of their aesthetic, which you seem to do as well with Lion. Is that the case?
Yeah, well, that was very important. So what kept me going through the writing of this album and the period of time that we were writing in was this image of Neil Haig, who's an amazing artist and author and researcher into the bigger questions of life, the history of the world. And he had this image called of the lion, which was a lion's face with the earth kind of on it. And that for me summed up what I wanted to say, that the earth is very, very powerful, and we need to tap into that power to realise our full potential. And Neil was kind enough to design the front cover.
That's excellent. Let's play another track now. This is the first of 2 instrumentals that appear on the record. This is called Sovereign. That was Richard Rozze and Sovereign from his Line album on Waterbound Records. That reminded me of 70s Larry Carlton, in particular Steely Dan in general. But there's also a much earlier Wes Montgomery influence on there. So did he consciously try and fuse the two styles or eras of music together on that track?
Yeah, I mean, the shuffle groove is very similar to jazz swing. So it lent itself to that kind of Wes type playing. So I chose the octaves to play the melody in. So for the listeners, Wes Montgomery had this amazing way of playing with his thumb, playing two notes an octave apart, so you get a lower note and a higher note, and that really brings the melody to the front. It adds a weight to what would otherwise be a single note. So I chose to use that technique, and then because it's a shuffle and the drums are quite heavy, it wasn't played on a jazz kit. It did lend itself to an overdriven sort of guitar solo, which it was a 3-3-5 with a gritty kind of sound, which is Larry Carlton, and he was a huge influence on me when I was starting to get into jazz. Room 335 and Kid Charlemagne.
Absolutely.
I learned all those tracks. Yeah.
Okay, we've mentioned Pat Metheny. We haven't talked about him, but here's a quote from him. He said, "Most of the sounds should come right from your hands, your own hands, and the way you make the strings sound." So do you yourself spend a lot of time working on your tone, and then do you think about, which tone would fit which song? Yeah,
I was fortunate to be recording in a local studio in Ramsgate, really great place called Big Jelly Studios. So I was able to fill the car up with all my amps, and I basically put them all over the studio, and we did, together with me and Jeff Alexander, who's the other guitarist in Open Water, who's got an amazing ear for tone, and Al, who was engineering the thing. We worked really hard at getting the best out of the guitar and the amp, and there wasn't many pedals involved. So for guitarists, I'm not a huge fan of guitar pedals. I really like that guitar straight into an amp thing, and again that comes back to Kossoff and Peter Green and the jazz guys. Absolutely. So Walter Trout told me many years ago that he was in the middle of a long tour and he experienced what he called an out-of-body moment in which the guitar seemed to be playing itself. And that sounds very familiar to something you said, and I quote, "I was not really in charge of what I was playing during one particular guitar solo, and it just flowed." So is that something that's happened on a number of occasions for you then? It's only happened twice, and I wish it would happen more. One was at the Broadstairs Folk Week, I remember playing many years ago. And the other one, and that was a packed marquee. We were supporting a band, I can't remember who it was. And then the other one was on the back of a trailer in the middle of Canterbury High Street on a freezing December day. So it didn't really matter what situation it was. It only ever happened twice. But what I'm trying to do now is trying to change the way I perceive performing. So try and remain more present during a performance. So all artists, musicians, we all suffer from self-interference. The voice in your head that says, no, you're going to muck this up, or this is the good bit, this is the bad bit. So, I'm trying to get rid of, to reduce that as much as possible, and then hopefully those moments will flow a bit more.
Great stuff. Let's play the title track of the record now. This is called Lion.
Trees, search the grasses, in hedgerows, in the city's crowded streets. The cry of a black crow, search the mountains as forests burn. Yeah, they burn. Along coastlines, do not leave a stone unturned. Drink blood like it's red wine. See the lion, hear him roar. Stand with pride forevermore. He won't be silenced or cast aside, or be crucified. Blow your your target and look upon cameras scanning everyone. Such words that are spoken, beat the boundaries with your sticks, obey the orders on which you're fed, drain the landscape with your tricks, sharpen your spearhead, see the lion, hear him roar, stands with pride forevermore. He won't be silenced or cast aside or be crucified.
Was Richard Rozze and Lion, the title track of his latest album on Waterbound Records. What's the release date for this record?
Well, it was September the 29th.
Yeah, I'm a bit late getting around to it. Great, okay.
Don't worry, yeah, but I think I sent out the links a lot later anyway.
Okay. Was Lion the title track then because it carries a kind of conceptual message which could be resilience and associated qualities?
Absolutely. Yes, and it was always going to be that. I mean, I know a few people said, "Oh, don't call it Lion. That doesn't really mean much," but to me, it had that message of power. And you think of the lion as being, all powerful and all knowing, and with Neil Haig's message, artwork, it had to be that, really.
Okay, I've got time for 2 more tracks, and this is an absolutely beautiful blues called Go It Alone.
So long, living a life so wrong. Now that I know your heart's made of stone, I'll go within, I'll go it alone. Too many times I gave you my all. You did not hear me call. I've carried a weight, this weight's all I've known. I'll go within, I'll go it alone. Can't see you're here, year after year. We were lost long ago. With every tear, gone is the fear. There is love if you learn to let go. were lost long ago. With every tear, gone is the fear. There is love when you learn to let go.
That was Richard Rozze and Go It Alone, taken from his Lion album, Waterbound Records. When I heard that, I inevitably thought of Peter Green. But probably because you let the song breathe as much as your heartfelt vocal and your delicate tone. When you came to record that, though, did it become much longer than you originally anticipated?
Yeah, it's quite a long track. We didn't realise how long it was until we finished it. So the first guitar solo had a particular length, you know, so that the whole song was written, so the guys were reading it, but we just let the end of the solo flow, you know, until it reached its natural. Yeah, and we could have faded it, but I'm not a fan of fades. I think, you know,
not on an emotional blues like that. If it was a more structured song, yeah, but more power to your elbows. It's an absolutely beautiful track. Oh. Now the whole album sounds like a coherent whole. It's well produced, but you tell us that it took up nearly 2 years or more to record. So was there ever a difficulty then in keeping in the same headspace or zone or even vision of what you wanted it to be, given that it was probably recorded in different sessions?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, it wasn't. What took the time was we also recorded and wrote an open water album at the same time, and I did a library music album as well with a friend of mine. So there was loads of different projects going on at the same time. I think I'd come up with the 4 tracks at the first session. Then, because I had the open water album to write and record, I purposely didn't rush writing the others, and there was lots of ideas that didn't make it, and then it just happened that time flew, and then next you know it, you're a year later and you're in the studio again recording the second half of it.
So how much of this stuff are you going to be able to play live then?
Well, all of it. So the whole, we've done a couple of concerts now where we've done the whole album.
Oh, good.
So the way I get around that, because it's quite orchestrated, is I use, for the guitarists amongst the listeners, I use 3 amps. So I have a Marshall 100 watt JMP, and then I have, that's for the lead guitar tone. Then I have a Cornell or Marshall Bluesbreaker for the gritty kind of Kossoff tone, and then I have a Fender Twin for the really clean stuff, and I just use an ABC switch and switch between the 3 amps. So the challenge is to step on the right pedals, and then get the different tones. Yeah.
So I'm going to play out with a track called Here on the Ground, which could easily have been, to my ears, the closing track of the album, which leads me to ask you, did you spend a considerable amount of time on track listing and sorting out the flow of the album then?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're writing, when you're putting together an album and also a concert, you've got to think about, 3 main things. Is the key, so don't have 2 songs of the same key next to each other. Tempo, make sure there's contrast in tempo between tracks. Dynamics, loud, quiet, aggressive, softer. And then in the middle, it felt like it needed to go into that bluesier kind of...
yeah, it fits perfectly, yeah.
Yeah, so it got a bit bluesier in the middle, yeah.
It's like a cathartic release in the middle of the record.
Absolutely, yeah. So hopefully you got people's attention, and then they're ready to sit down and really listen to the slower tracks, and then you build it back up again for the end.
Richard, we could be talking all night. I'm fascinated by this album and your knowledge of all this stuff. But I've got to go. But before we do, just give us your social media links so people can check out the album and see where you're gigging and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so my website is www.richardrozze.com, and via there you can find the Facebook and Instagram posts as well.
Excellent. Thanks again. So here's Richard Rozze and Here on the Ground, taken from the Lion album and Waterbound Records. Enjoy this track, everybody. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Thank you, Pete.
finds me, my feet they touch the ground. Why have I come here to listen to the sounds? Tranquil river, the trees they touch the sky. I feel you near me, but I don't need to try. I'm asking, guide me through the lies. I'm taking time, I'll learn to fly. Here on the ground, I will be found. There will be something to show me the way. Out of the rain, begin again. There will be something to show me the way. Chasing strangers,